Welcome to another episode of Megaphone. Let's get right into talking about world wounds and what they are. This episode is titled World Wounds: What If Men Aren't the Problem? I invite you to ask where your thoughts went as a conclusion. That will be an important nugget to hold on to for the end. World wounds are the collective pain we all share. How that pain gets expressed depends on who's willing to hold it and who's willing to hide it. I've openly expressed how I believe men contribute to a larger problem by not expressing their pain, and I stand by that. So I really want to get straight to the heart of the matter, which is that I think the world is largely managed by closeted men. Men have been told for a long time what they're allowed to want, who to love, what to feel, what to become. And you hand those same men money and power, and a lot of them will use that power, making sure the rest of us fall in line the way they had to. And honestly, precision matters here to me more than the outrage of it does. I think that's the sensationalist part that is so attractive in media. But I don't think these men are the problem. I think they're the result of a system that's built to reward complacency, repression, and dogma. So before I go further, I want to hold myself to this standard where we get a little bit more intellectual in the way that this conversation deserves to be. Philippa Foot, born 1920 and died in 2010, was an English philosopher, one of the architects of modern virtue ethics, and for what it's worth, and interestingly, the granddaughter of U.S. President Grover Cleveland. She spent her career at Somerville College, Oxford, and later at UCLA. And what she's remembered for is the trolley problem, a runaway trolley bearing down on 5 people tied to the tracks. You're standing at a lever, and you pull it, and the trolley switches to a second track where it kills just one person instead. Or you can just not be a part of the decision and let it run over, 5 people. So the question is, and this has been discussed in philosophical settings for decades, is do you pull the lever? It's framed as this sort of clean, forked decision between utilitarianism and deontological principle. And Foot herself was a lifelong committed Oxfam supporter who spent her actual life thinking about large-scale human suffering. So it wasn't just these sort of abstract puzzles that she thought of. And I don't think that she built this to be a weapon, if I'm honest, but I think it's been turned into one anyway, as many things have. And I want to walk you through how. So the way I see it in this philosophical decision is that you're stripping morality down to a binary with no context outside of, the very, elemental pieces, and you're asking for a fight in that. Nobody asks who built, the trolley to have this sort of decided effect where anybody can just walk up to it and pull it. Nobody's asking who tied them to the tracks in the first place. And everyone gets pulled into this argument about who deserves to live as if that was the most interesting part of this scenario. So I think modern versions are escalating it even further, talking about the elderly person or the child, or whether it's a laborer or a scientist. And I think that reduces morality and collapses it into like a rank of human worth. So my actual point is a tool built to sharpen ethical reasoning can be psychologically operated on to do the opposite to you, which is to keep people fighting each other over individual guilt while the structures and corporate institutions continue to rule over us. So here's the thread that I'm pulling. I think that same move, stripping the context, forcing people to fight each other, is exactly what happens with the closeted men that I opened with. We get handed their hypocrisies, to argue over instead of being asked a more useful question, which is what kind of system makes hiding yourself the ticket for power and success? So if I'm right about that, the men taking the heat are not the ones at the top. They're like literally a middle management. And above them are entities who benefit from staffing every level of power with leaders who have something to lose. So if any of this is resonating with you and you want your own threads to pull on regarding this world wound, here's what I would watch out for when just kind of consuming everyday media or content or updates in the world. If you see money backing before a proven track record of someone, so asking who tends to get backed early before they even prove anything, would it be logical to assume the ones who get backed early have an overwhelming overlap with the same people who have something to hide? Number two is exposure being this sort of leash, the threatening of exposure. A secret is only going to become a weapon once someone else knows it. And that's how blackmail has literally worked since the dawn of time. And then the third is overcorrection. I feel like you can watch a politician who legislates against someone's private life with more heat than the issue calls for. And I read that as a man proving to whoever's watching him that is not his voters. I think he's actually proving to someone like his boss that he's willing to go there. And I don't think this is a right or a left problem. And I have zero interest in making it one. Partly because I don't think it's true. And partly because I think which side is worse is exactly the system they want us to have, instead of using the one that asks outside of the trolley problem. Which on the right, you have aggressive, moralizing legislation about how people are allowed to live. And it just feels like they're trying to prove a loyalty to an outside entity versus like actually caring about the issues that they're talking about. And on the left, which I find to be much more lethal in my opinion, is this identity politics and culture war language standing in for actual like structural critique that's needed. And that's a way to keep people arguing. You can bet your ass that if you start questioning things too close to the sun, aka the truth, there will be a diagnosis or a label ready to be thrown at you to dismiss your thinking and, more importantly, your logic. So if that's true, the partisan fight is dead by design. And there's like these two tracks on the same trolley. And we've been handed this lever and told that it feels powerful for us to pick a side. And so that's what I'm getting at, is like we've been told that that's what's powerful, but that's not really what is. And where I land with it is that I think most of what gets called political conflict is the same mechanism as this trolley problem. You know, you take this complex concept, you strip it down to honestly an impossible personal choice, and then you shame people instead of adding context. And the shame is real. I've felt it. I feel like the left is like experts of making you feel that. And I feel like most people listening to this have felt that. And so it's not about just trusting the conclusion of wherever I'm taking this and, you know, where my thinking goes, but it is to stop accepting the shame as some sort of consequence for asking who benefits from you carrying that shame. And so back to these closeted men being management. So then who are the entities that rule said management? Like, who are their bosses? Back to that little nugget I told you to hold on to when you read the title and where your thoughts went. Was it who you assumed I meant when I said, what if men aren't the problem? Or did this Trolleyan form of thinking send you into this binary assumption that I meant women? In future episodes, we're going to speak on the paradoxes of this world, paradoxes meaning two truths existing at once among other definitions. And the answer to this world wound, in my humble opinion, is that men are the problem insofar as they perpetuate a restrictive narrative. And closeted men are doing the most damage. But on behalf of who? There are greater forces manipulating our humanity that we need to start looking at. But it starts by acknowledging that men are only a cog in a wheel of deception that is perhaps more greater than we could fathom.